Hello, Humane marketers. Sarah Znekrocha here. Welcome to another episode of the Humane Marketing Podcast, a place to be for the generation of marketers who cares. This is the show where we talk about marketing your business in a way that feels good to you, is aligned with your values, and also resonates more with your conscious customers because it's not pushy, ethical, and also beautiful. So if you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of humane marketing. And if you're new here and this is your first time, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. You may want to download your one-page marketing plan with the 7 Ps of humane marketing in the form of a mandala at humane.marketing/one page, the number 1 and page. So again, humane.marketing/one page. And with that, with no further ado, let's dive into today's conversation. Hi, Caroline. So good to see you again. We haven't seen each other for a long time, so it's good to hang out on Zoom and obviously then put it on the podcast and on YouTube. But for us, it's just the two of us, right? Which is fun.
Yeah.
Good to have you on the
So
Humane
lovely to have a
Marketing
conversation with you again.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. And it's always fun to see when talking to people on the other side, right? You're in a t-shirt and I'm in like my wool poncho. Always
it's quite warm here tonight.
Yeah, could tell. Wonderful. So we decided to talk about pivoting for good because you just hosted a summit around pivoting where you were so kind to invite me and share my story of the pivot to humane marketing away from my LinkedIn consulting business and then to gentle marketing and then to humane marketing. And so as I was kind of reading through the other stories of pivoters, I was thinking, hey, that actually makes a really good subject for a conversation on the podcast. And, you know, you make the perfect guest for it. So you are.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we go way back. We have had prior exchanges, mainly related to being introverts and being in business and marketing and all of that. So it's good to catch up with you. So let's go to that summit and maybe kind of with this lens of pivoting for good. What stands out to you now that the summit is over? Do you feel like there was a bit of a theme related to pivoting for good? And maybe I can define to listeners what I mean by that. Yeah, it's kind of like coming from the traditional business model of like just making money, paying the bills, individualistic, to a more out there model, meaning like it's not just me for my business, but I'm actually wanting to contribute to change. So that's what I think for this podcast we define as pivoting for good. So did you notice kind of a theme in your summit from people's stories?
There's definitely, I think, a theme of pivoting for good. And there's some people like yourself who have a very defined how they're going to, how they want to make the world a better place. You know, that sort of idea of improving things for the communities they're in. So I think there are a couple of people like that, like Louise, who's from Leap 32 Marketing, very much wants to work with companies who are purpose-led. I think she's probably one of the most obvious ones. But I think the other thing that really stood out for me is people pivoting to businesses that really reflected their values. And so trying to show that their values coming through in their work and hopefully then influencing the world that they're sort of operating in to try and ensure their values are actually being reflected in those communities that they're working with, I guess is how I would put it. So not always having a really clearly defined, this is how I help my community, but almost all of them had a very clear, I want my values to be reflected in my work. And so through values, hopefully I can make the place, you know, just a little bit better than what it was like when they started in business.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting because that's kind of I did a video recently on the individual in the community, because that's kind of, if you look at astrology, that's kind of the theme of the time of Aquarius, where it's very much individualistic and saying, I want to do what I want to do and my values and all of that. But then it's also a time of, well, how do I, given who I am, fit into the community? And it feels like maybe that's the first step of, really expressing our values and not just being kind of defined by our clients. Because let's say 10 years ago, it was all about, adapting to the clients, right? The client was the king and all of that. And now it's like, well, what if I start with myself first and put my values first? So it seems like there's a journey of saying, okay, I want to do a business how I want to do it. And then the next step will be like, well, how does that contribute to community at large, to humanity at large? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that came through was, and it still ties into that individualistic idea, but then taking it further, is there are people who, like myself, where I want to see introverts do well, but there are also quite a few people who took part who want to help other HSP people thrive. So very much seeing community in that sort of sense, that they want people in that particular community of HSP to thrive, or for me, I said introverts. So there's also that it's sort of individualistic because it's who you are and wanting others who are like you to thrive.
Mm-hmm. But
still
in
in
a
a
way, also
positive
building
way.
community with those similar people, right? Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
often groups that don't do well or haven't been valued perhaps as much as society.
Yeah.
I think
I'm thinking of
HSPs.
I'm thinking of neurodivergent people as well.
Yep.
That's kind of, a new thing in the business world, that there is
Yep.
movements of neurodivergent people. And so I think that's another, yeah, you're right. It's kind of like, okay, we finally can say how we're wired and who we are, and let's find common people who are just like us, and create communities with those people. Yeah, you're very right.
Yeah, and I think helping them as well to be seen and valued by society. So thinking about those HSP people, highly sensitive people have often been seen as too sensitive. And now perhaps we're hopefully starting to see their sensitivity as something that really adds to the world that we're in. And so how do we help them get themselves out into the world and share their sensitivity better? I think it's an interesting idea of community.
And I really believe that helps in this paradigm shift that kind of goes from a very, very masculine energy to a more feminine energy. And HSPs kind of have this gift to bring out the feminine energy, right? So
Yes.
it belongs to that shift as well. Yeah. Maybe can you pick like one or two stories that really stood out to you and that you would love to share here?
I think probably two. So one of the ones I thought was really interesting is Nadia Finest, who went from being a business coach, and she now helps people who are shy like herself and have a really, she has her voice is quite high pitched, I guess you'd say. And I think, she's in the past, she's really struggled with her voice and she's struggled with shyness. And so I think that's been really interesting. It's a really interesting story for me of moving away from the online business world or on business coaching, which I think she was getting very jaded about. And then coming around to this idea, well, she can help shy people instead, and bringing a lot of her, I can see with the work that she does online that she brings a lot of those skills that she got as a business coach to then helping get her voice out about how shy people can be supported in the workplace. So I really liked her story,
Mm-hmm.
particularly I think you often see it going the other way of people moving from, say, a life coach to a business coach. And you know,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with that, but I think yeah, that's seen as a much more natural path. Going
Right.
perhaps sort of in the other direction, I think was really interesting.
Yeah.
And then I really like Ruth Pound White's story that, you know, she had a really successful copywriting business, and she gave that away to be a business coach and a soulful, you know, helping people with their sales and doing it in a soulful way. And I think that again is really interesting. I think, but for me, both of them are that whole giving up something that's earning you money, doing well, that society probably sees and values you doing, moving into, you know, completely giving that up and doing something new. I think they're the two that, I think for me, it's the courage of giving up something successful to start again is really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me laugh because I remember when I first put out the Marketing Like We're Human book, and then was on these typical marketing podcasts, and they would always ask me about conversion rates and, you know, does this actually work? Do we have proof that humane marketing works? And kind of
Yeah.
my counter question was always like, well, the question is more like, does the traditional marketing still work for you? Can you still sleep at night, right? Doing the things
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
doing now. And so
Yeah.
it's like, well, if it still works for you, then yeah, why give it up, right? But if you just know deep inside, well, this is actually not working for me anymore, then you need the courage to leave it behind and
Yeah.
pivot to something else. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's really the thing about a pivot. Like, okay, sometimes it might be a forced pivot, which kind
Mm.
of was, you know, the story for me with the
Yeah.
trademark issue, moving away from gentle marketing. Okay, that was a forced pivot. I'm glad it happened now, looking back. But then, yeah, so what would you say? Are there different reasons? We just mentioned one or two, the forced one, and then the one where it's kind of like, well, something's not working for me. Is there another reason that you noticed why people are moving away from or pivoting to something else?
So Louise, who I mentioned before from Leap 32, I think she's probably the only person in the whole project who pivoted because she thought there was more. So I thought hers was really interesting in that regard, in that it wasn't that she was particularly unhappy in the role she was in, but she could see that there was more. And I think that's probably the other
Right.
reason is that you can see there are possibilities to get more out of your life and to get more out of your business.
Yeah.
And hopefully, and in her case, to give back more to community than what she was doing in her
Right.
old job.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the others are forced. I mean, I would even say in some ways, you know, both of our pivots were forced in terms of feeling so uncomfortable with what we were doing. That it was also almost our, you know, when you stop doing your traditional marketing and I stopped doing Facebook ads, it was very much, you're almost forced because it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Because of ethical reasons, right? You're like, just...
Yeah. Whereas some people are forced because, you know, Celia, who shared her story, she probably could have kept going, but she had a co-working space, and obviously COVID hit. There was no co-working, so it gave her an opportunity to really reassess what she was doing. So, you know, different types of forced, I think.
Yeah. What you mentioned about is there more, this question, I think for me in the LinkedIn, when I transitioned out of the LinkedIn consulting, I think that's what it was for me. Like, is this all I'm ever gonna do? Is
Yeah.
there more? So it wasn't
Yeah.
like more in terms of can I make more money somewhere else, but
Yeah.
it's like in my life, is this my role, or is there something else, something deeper? And I guess that's also what I'm hinting at towards, you know, the pivoting for good. I think a lot of people feel this calling right now for more.
Yeah.
Like, how can I contribute to this shift right now with my business? And isn't there a pivot that I should be making right now? So yeah, I'd agree that it's probably those three. Is like, is there more? Another one is a forced pivot, and the third one is more like, well, what can I let go of and do
Yeah.
something else? Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. That really resonates. In terms of what I just said, is there more? So it's not usually money. Was that a common theme as well? That most of the people didn't pivot because it's like, well, I want to make even more money, and that's the reason for the pivot. I guess the question is like, would people still measure success with just money, or were people measuring success in another way?
Yeah. I don't think anyone measured success through money, or maybe one, maybe Amber McHugh did, and hers was a forced pivot.
Mm-hmm.
So she had a boudoir photography company, and again, COVID shut them down. And so they used that first year of the COVID to actually decide to really invest in their company and grow it significantly after COVID. But I think she was probably the only person who even, thought, had a money as a measure of her success. For everyone else, it was much more about giving back to community or doing work that was more interesting to them. So that's still that individualistic side, but what work feels good to them to do.
Right.
And yeah, I think they would probably be the main two, actually, is that doing work they enjoy and being able to give back
Mm-hmm.
were the two main measures of success that got mentioned in the project.
Yeah, kind of this inner peace as well, right? With just being happy in your work,
Yeah.
rather than feeling like you're doing something that is not aligned. That's kind of the sense I got from most of the stories as well.
And I think working with people who they were aligned with was another one.
Mm-hmm.
So having clients that are in alignment, so I mean, I guess similar to you, finding people who do marketing. There's a few other people in the project that do marketing, and it was very much about finding ways of doing it ethically and working with people who want to do marketing in a way that feels good. Isn't that more aggressive masculine marketing that we see so often? So that definitely came through for quite a few people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another topic that comes to mind is, because it's one of my kind of like, yeah, it's really important to me, is the collaboration instead of competition. So
Yeah.
did you feel like there was also a bit of a pivot towards more, let's see how we can collaborate as entrepreneurs. Let's see how I can tap into, because most of these business owners, entrepreneurs already had existing experience. So was that a priority for people to pivot into kind of like, yeah, more community building or more collaboration with others? What did you see?
No, I didn't actually see much of that,
Okay.
which was really interesting for me because, over the past year, as I've been, sort of wending my way through my own messy pivot, I think community and collaboration has really come up as a theme for me.
Mm.
That's one of the reasons why I organised the Pivot Project, that I love the idea of sharing a range of voices, because I think we gain so much from hearing how different people are doing things and their thoughts on them, that it can help us to shape our own ideas around how we want to do our businesses, how we want to interact with the world, how we want to make it bigger and better, bigger not necessarily in a money sense, but bigger in terms of maybe bigger hearted.
Right.
but it's really interesting. I don't think community came through in the actual stories. I
Right.
certainly saw it as part of the Pivot project,
Mm-hmm.
that people really enjoyed, that they, I've had messages from people who took part that one of the things that they've really got out of that is they've met some really fantastic new people who that they were in the project with. And that's been really exciting for me. So it's
That's
interesting. I think
nice.
it
Yeah. So
didn't
they
come up a lot.
interconnected. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not so much in their own stories, but definitely as part of being in the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know that I only know that Andy Mort, who was also
Yeah.
featured, he has his own community and
Mm.
and it's important to him. And I do. I don't know if anybody else, yeah, has that or it's important to them, but I'm curious about your own pivot. So tell us more about, what's been going on for you over the last year or so.
I think for me, so I've done a number of different things. I started off doing sort of Facebook ads and then some tech VA work, and now really settling on, well, I wouldn't say settled. So the business strategy is definitely is the best use of my skills, I think, bringing together my accounting, my planning skills, my problem solving. But
Right.
for me, I think over the past year, the real pivot has been around who I help.
Mm,
And I think for me, part of that has been, I say I help introverts, but I've been realizing over the past year that that's too big a group, and
mm,
that there are some other important things that fit into that group for me. A big one, and probably because I've been spending too much time reading your stuff, is ethical marketing, and that it's really important to me that the introverts I work with share that ethical marketing, humane marketing perspective.
mm-hmm.
I don't want to work with people who are only there for the money. Um, we all need money. I think money is wonderful, but there's something more to what they want to get from their business is part of that.
Right.
And then certainly overthinking, I think, is another bit that I've struggled with. And I think that's where I also bring a set of skills, is to helping people who overthink with planning. But definitely the big one has been that ethical, because I've seen people who are introverts, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're ethical. I think it's really easy to label yourself. So I label myself as an introvert and then think, oh, because I want ethical marketing, that all introverts are going to be into ethical marketing as well, which of course is completely not true. And I think it's getting that better sense of who I want to work with and support. That's been that last year, the pivot of the last year has been really trying to work out who that person is, or who those people are that I want to work with and support.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm just thinking back to, yeah, my first podcast. I was also, interviewing introverts, and I think that's where you and I met for the first time. And
Yeah,
it's true, back then that was like a big thing. Oh my God, you're saying out loud that you're an introvert, right? And so
yeah,
we thought, oh, okay, all introverts think alike. And
yeah,
then, obviously we noticed, oh, that's not true at all. And it really kind of confirms this idea that I say that to make your worldview your niche,
yes,
rather than
yeah,
just have a niche of introverts. Well, your worldview is, let's do things ethically, and then that becomes the niche within the introverts, right? So it's not
yes, yeah,
every introvert, but just the ones that align with your worldview. And
yeah,
I think it's an evolution, right? It's just like,
yeah,
yeah, this is becoming more and more important. And so it's interesting to hear. And I noticed the same thing for me. I'm like, well, yeah, it used to be introverts, definitely not true anymore, because I know a lot of
yeah,
introverts where I'm like, no, it's not,
mm,
there's no resonance. And the reason is
yeah,
because we don't have the same worldview.
yeah.
Mm, it's really
I
interesting.
think for me, it's still introverts, because, and probably ambiverts. I think people who are really extroverted, I don't do as well with. you know, my work style doesn't work as well with them. It's not to say I would never work with an extrovert, but you know, I think my work, how I work, is what attracts introverts, but it's the worldview that then drives the other bit. So it's sort of bringing the how I work with the how I think together to make it a much more aligned business for me.
Right. I started to call my ideal clients deep thinkers because I
Yep.
feel like it doesn't matter whether they're introverted or extroverted. That's just how they recharge their battery. But
Yeah.
if they are deep thinkers, thinking about things deeply, thinking about, you know, our current challenges, so not just thinking about themselves, that's to me is kind of the definition. And oftentimes they are introverts, but not always. So
Yeah.
it's
I've
just,
been thinking, for me, the word I want to bring into my work is that I really love is thoughtful, because I really like the duality of the word, that it's got that deep thinker part in it, that they're thoughtful about their business and intentional. But then I also really like the idea of thoughtful in terms of kindness and thinking about clients. So that's sort of, I think, where I'm heading.
yeah,
And
I
I
like
think that
that.
combines that you can be an extrovert and be a deep thinker. So, you know, probably does, I would work with extroverts who fit into that category, but then also that I do want to see a kinder world. And that's where the other part of that word comes from.
I like that. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting how much power and resonance words have, right? And
Mm.
obviously that's a big thing in marketing and communication. Let's
Definitely.
let's kind of wrap up and talk a little bit about, well, you know, if somebody is listening and they're like, oh my God, yeah, that's exactly what has been happening over the last year or so.
Mm.
Where would you say, where do you start? Where did you start? Because again, it can take a lot of courage to, you know, move into another direction or let something go that has been working well, or maybe it hasn't been working well, but it's the only thing
Yep.
you have. So yeah, what were your first steps in the new direction?
I think for me, I was the only one who talked about this on the project, that for me, I got so out of alignment with my business that I actually went back to work and got a job. And so
Mm,
that I was financially secure. And for me, that's one of the most, you know, I think that's one of the really important things in making I don't want to call it a courageous pivot, but, you know, in making a pivot that perhaps doesn't feel as accepted by family or whoever it is, that you need to have that money piece
yeah, that's a,
sorted to be creative. Like if you can't pay your bills, I think it's really difficult, you know, to be able to take that step. You know,
yeah,
if
yeah,
if you're worried about money, then you're going to make unaligned decisions in the name of money. And I still
exactly.
do that today. I think I still take on clients that I shouldn't, because I think money still feeds into that. But I'm getting better at saying no to people. But yeah, so definitely for me, it was money. And then really, I think my best advice is just to start journaling about what you want it to actually look like. That it's amazing what happens when you start to get things down on paper and then start to look for other people in that world. So, you know, for me, it was starting to find people like you, like Ruth Poundwhite, other people who are doing, you know, who have that similar worldview to that I do, and looking at how they do their business and what they're sharing about their thoughts on how you can do business in a way that feels much better for you and hopefully is much better for your community.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the money piece. I think it's actually a very courageous pivot because there's so much stigma around, you know,
Mm,
business owners going back to work.
yep.
And I think that is the best, I mean, most courageous thing you can do, because you're right, you can't even think if you don't have
Yeah.
that financial safety. So don't start planning in that scarcity mode, because
Yeah.
it's not going to work. So yeah, I'm
I've
glad you
actually
brought that up.
I've seen quite a few bigger business names sharing that they've gone and taken jobs this past year.
Hmm.
So either they've become a fractional marketing officer for someone,
Yeah.
that kind of role. And I really like that they're sharing that and hopefully taking away
I
some of
hadn't
that
seen
stigma
that,
that
but
a
that's
job is
really,
bad.
yeah, that's really nice to hear because it's
Yeah,
true that, um, and I think especially, the big businesses, I think there has been a huge kind of shift in terms of, what works and what doesn't work. And it's especially
yeah,
the big businesses with big expenses, right? That
yeah,
realized, well, things are not working anymore like they used to before the pandemic. So,
yeah. So I'm really hoping that message gets out that actually it's okay to take a job if that's what you need to do,
yeah,
in this season. And there'll
yeah,
be another season where you come up with a fabulous business that you love, rather than trying to make something that doesn't support you succeed. I often think you might as well have a job in that case. If you're doing a business that doesn't light you up,
yeah.
then you might as well have a job. It's probably a lot easier. You can shut off at the end of the day, hopefully. Yeah,
It's the
I
same
think
thing
business,
with people who are wanting to start their first business. I always say, build it while you still are on the
yeah,
job so you have that financial security. Because otherwise it just, yeah, it really is scary. So, yeah. And I
yeah,
think at the end of the Marketing Like We're Human book, I also mentioned that in terms of shifting to a different way of marketing. Because
yeah,
what happened for me, there was like a big drop, right? When
yeah,
you shift from the kind of the pushy marketing stuff and the pushy launches and all of that into a more humane approach to marketing.
yeah,
And right now I'm, onboarding for the Marketing Like We're Human program, and I'm having conversations with people, right? So yeah, it takes a lot more time. And so there's going
yeah,
to be fewer people. So obviously there's a shift also in the income, and
yeah,
you need to adjust for that, and you can't just do it
yeah,
overnight. So kind of like, yeah, maybe still keep doing what works well because of the money safety, and then slowly shift
yeah.
out of it as you grow the other side. Yeah.
And you can definitely, I think, with marketing, there's always an option to even just change it slightly. So you start to, if you get rid of the particularly masculine element of your marketing, that particularly aggressive, you can still do reasonably well while you're moving it to become more how you want it to be, that
Exactly.
humane.
Yeah, it's those small shifts. Yeah.
Yeah, that everything doesn't have to be a big, right, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm only doing this. There's definitely a gradual move that you can take if that's what's going to make you going to be able to support you financially as you
Right.
make the shift.
Yeah. So good. Any other, I think like the question is in terms of the future, where do you see the future of business, humane business? Do you feel like there is going to be more and more a move towards this more aligned and ethical business? Do you see that in Australia, for example?
I think I was, but I think with the change in economic conditions, that has meant
Mm.
that people
Right.
feel less. Like it's that, well, you said before, it's that whole scarcity. So because people are struggling to find clients, your business is struggling, things feel like they're scarce. That means that I think you tend to slip back into perhaps not so ethical marketing that has worked for you in the past. That, yeah, I think the economic conditions might slow the movement down
Yeah,
a little bit.
that's for sure.
I think people will
Unfortunately,
be less willing to take risks, which you can completely understand.
yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunately always like that when things are back. Well, people are scared, and we go back to the things that work and that create immediate income, right? Yeah,
Yeah, I think my hope is though that it will be, we've taken 2 steps forward and we're only going one back. So we're always moving forward, even if it's at a much slower pace than perhaps we would ideally like. But it's
yeah,
still a move. It's still better than it was.
yeah. Yeah, it's baby steps, like you said. Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, let's leave it on that positive tone. Thanks so much for sharing your insights, Caroline. This has been delightful. I always ask one question, and that is, what are you grateful for today and this week?
At the moment, I'm just really, so my two dogs have been quite sick. So I'm
Mm.
just very grateful that they're healthy this week and I'm enjoying their company. And then I can hear them making crying noises in the background
Oh.
as we talk because they're
Oh,
showing the back room and they want to come out.
yeah, I'll let you go back to them. I'm glad you saying that, because I remember, like, even like weeks back when we exchanged emails, you were saying that they were sick, so they must have been
Yeah.
sick for a while now. Yeah,
Yeah. I
I'm
mean, they've
glad.
got terminal illnesses, but we're hit a good patch this week. So you have to take those wins.
Yeah, wonderful to hang out. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Thanks so much for watching and being part of a generation of marketers who cares for yourself, for your clients, and for the planet. We really are change makers before we are marketers. So go ahead, be the change you want to see in the world. And I hope to see you again next week. Take care.